Streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and blasttheradio.com, this is The Lowell Green Show. The number to call and be heard around the world is 613-413-2217. Or email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. And now, here is Lowell Green.
Thank you, John. What was that last song you just played, please?
It's called Zoot Suit Riot by the Cherry Poppin' Daddies.
Seems to me ample evidence that not all music back in the good old days was all that great.
Oh, well, that's a fairly modern song based on a lot of stuff from the 30s.
Oh, geez. Zoot Suit Riot. Remember the Zoot Suits?
I do.
Oh my goodness!
But I remember the Zoot Suits that were a spin-off of the 1930s Zoot Suits, the ones we had in the 80s, which weren't quite Zoot Suits.
Remember did they have the fat? Where did you grow up? Where were you a teenager?
Here in Ottawa.
Did you go through a fad whereby you had to drape your jeans at the ankle and you would scotch tape them, or in some cases staple them to? Did you ever do that?
No, I never did that.
How about fedoras? We went through in Brantford, and we went through a stage where all the guys wore fedoras. Did you go through that?
Only because Michael Jackson wore one in the video for Beat It. Yeah.
You guys had a terrible childhood here.
We thought we were pretty cool.
Now, the other thing I have to ask you, when you were a teenager, did you patrol up and down a street or two in a car and just go back and forth, up and down?
No, I did that on the OC Transpo.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
We had in Brantford. There were two main streets, Colburn and Dalhousie. And
you say Dalhousie there?
Yeah.
Not Dalhousie, not Dalhousie. Dalhousie.
No, it was Dalhousie. Yeah.
That's right in the middle. Okay, all right.
Colburn and Dalhousie. And each was one way. So you'd go down Colburn, turn around, and then come back up Dalhousie. And then you'd turn around and go down Colburn. I don't know what, we'd all night long. And we all did this. That was the entertainment. Of course, the entertainment for young people in Sudbury. Ever been to Sudbury?
Oh, yes.
It was the slag pouring time in Azilda. I even wrote a song about that. When it's slag pouring time in Azilda, and with the rest of us sort of dirty words because all sorts of things would happen. But it was quite spectacular. There was this great big sort of semi-mountain of molten rock. Because from the nickel mine, okay, they extract the rock, they extract the nickel,
right,
and they would melt the rock, so it's all red, and in some cases even white hot. And then there was a little trolley car that would take the slag, the molten rock, still red hot, up to the top of this mountain and dump it, and then it would run down like lava flowing down. And it was great entertainment. All the kids, when you go out parking, okay, those are the days before the motels, right? So. Or whatever they do today, I don't know. But everybody would park along and watch them slay. That's where you'd take your first date. You didn't go bowling. You didn't go to a movie in Sudbury. You went to see slag being poured at Azilda. I just thought I'd pass that on. Anybody that grew up in that area, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Todd says here in town for him, it was Carling Avenue, up and down Carling Avenue.
Carling Avenue, oh, yes.
There was a lot of stuff on Carling Avenue then, though. You would have had the Talisman. You would have had a couple of movie theaters along there.
That's not why I did it. You're looking for girls.
No, yes.
I don't know what you were going to do if you ever saw a girl. And the girls would walk up and down, too. And they wouldn't. But here was the game, okay? You had 4 or 5 guys in the car, up and down Colburn, up and down Dalhousie, okay? And you'd see about 4 or 5 girls. They were always in groups. But girls would pretend they didn't see you. Now, they were walking up and down the street because they wanted to see the guys, right? I mean, what other reason? But no. You'd drive by, you'd hoot and holler, honk your horn. They would pretend that they didn't see you.
Nothing girls like more than hooting and hollering and horn honking. Nah, for me, I was a kid growing up in the suburbs. If I wanted to see girls, I had to go to Bayshore Shopping Center. That was the big excuse.
Anyway, on with the show.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Enough of this levity. I am declaring the Lowell Green Show today to be a vax-free zone.
Oh, okay.
No vaccine talk, please, okay? We've had enough of this. I do have several questions, and I hope that some of you will respond to some of the questions. some of the responses we get here, people saying, "Oh, hi," like it's a little sort of, I don't know, a picnic or something. Oh, that's fine and dandy, but it'd be nice to have some people actually answer some of the questions. Number one question. Okay, I hit you with it. September 14, 2019. What happened that date? John Melky.
Oh, Jesus.
No, he had nothing to do with it.
Jesus had nothing to do with it. Okay.
A couple of thousand years here. You have
September 14.
Okay, all right, yeah, 2019. Well, I'll tell you.
Thank you.
I didn't expect, and I didn't know until I did some research, okay? The mayor and a whole passel of sort of semi-important people board a train, and take the first ride on Ottawa's multi-billion-dollar light rail system, okay? So here we are, almost 2 years later, and I think we're still trying to figure out, holy jumping catfish, was it worth the disruption? Is it worth the $1 billion we've spent on it? All of the delays, all of the startup problems?
Well, certainly not in our current state, it's not.
Is the darn thing worth it? Is it going to be worth it? What do you think? Now, by the way, if there's anybody out there who's listening here, who's actually ever used the light rail, I'd like to hear from you, your experience, okay? How did you enjoy the flat wheels? We're spending, of course, billions of dollars to extend it eastward, westward, and southward. On the surface, it sounds like a good idea, but you know what? I'm not so sure. I'll tell you why. I think that COVID, I'm not talking about vaccines, but I think that COVID has changed. I think it's changed the work habits so much, particularly in this city, that I am not sure if we will ever go back to the kind of traffic that we used to have into downtown Ottawa. I mean, so many people are still working from home. My daughter and my son both work from home, and they love it. And there is no chance, as far as I can see, that either one of them will ever go back to work in downtown Ottawa. So there is too fewer people who will require transportation into downtown. And I suspect they're not the only ones. So I think the jury is still out. Now, of course, we had no way of knowing when we planned east, west, south. We had no way of knowing that this would change so drastically. But I think, I just think the world has taken a little bit of a seismic shift here. I don't think that we will ever have the same number of people going to big offices. For example, my son works for a very large international company. They have a large office building in downtown Ottawa, and they, from what I hear, they are greatly reducing the office size, even reducing the cubicles in the office space, because they figure that a good chunk of their people will never go back to work in the office. It's worked so well from home, and it's so much cheaper. You don't have to rent all of that office space, et cetera, et cetera. People don't have to commute. So I guess all of this sort of begs the question, are we going to have sufficient riders to really make the east, west, and south routes pay for themselves worthwhile? I don't know. I think the jury is still out. But I'd like to know what you think. We've spent a lot of money, billions of dollars. The disruption in downtown and other was just tremendous. I mean, the disruption to people's lives in downtown was just fantastic. Do you think it's worth it? John, once again, I say we got some text. Just give us the number again, how people can respond here.
Yeah, and a reminder, if you call the show this week, you will automatically be entered to win an Alexa smart speaker, courtesy of blasttheradio.com.
Did you hear that, Alexa? Just a minute, I'm speaking to my Alexa. You hear that, Alexa? Okay, go ahead.
We're going to replace you, Alexa, with an Alexa.
Alexa, please don't play Zoot Suit Riot. Alexa, don't play Zoot Suit Riot. We've heard enough of that.
All right, listen, Mr. Comedian, it's my job to be serious here, all right? 613...
Oh, just a minute. There's Alexa responding.
Is she? You know, Lowell, that's one of my most favorite things to do is to turn up the volume on people who are listening on their smart speakers by asking it to do that.
Right?
Oh, yeah. The number here is 613-413 2217. Again, 613-413-2217. You can also email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. Everything about the show is available to you at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. All right, is the LRT worth it? David says, I've never used the LRT. Peter says, why are all LRTs in liberal mayor cities usually late and failures, I'm told? People who worked on them, many workers question the costs to build and waste. Kevin says, you take your life in your hands to ride the terrible road conditions in Ottawa. He's a motorcycle driver, by the way. He says, but we spend billions on a useless LRT. And Sonia says, my husband was saying that the pandemic has changed the habits of people.
Very true. I have another question here. Does Jim Watson deserve another term of office as mayor? Now, as you know, the mayor apparently is wondering whether he should be running again or not. Apparently, he has not made up his mind. One of the reasons that perhaps he hasn't made up his mind is, I don't know, he may be seeing what else is available for him, sort of throwing the anchor out there. You know, is anybody going to bite? It could also be that he's not sure if he could win against a real popular candidate. I mean, it was Mark Twain who said politicians and babies' diapers need frequent changing for the same reason. People do get tired of politicians. So I'm just wondering if you think that Jim Watson is deserving of yet another term of office. And by the way, when we're discussing this, what do you think? Have you got anybody that you would like to see run? Is there anybody out there that you think could actually beat Watson if he did run? But I'd just like you to give me an assessment of what you think Jim Watson has done, if he deserves another term. What kind of a job has he done? Are you satisfied, not satisfied? Let's go to the phones. Anne is on the phone. Yes, Anne. Hello,
hi,
Anne.
Laura. I'm calling
Yes.
about the LRT.
Yes.
I so hate the LRT. They just ruined the city by putting it in. I live over in the West End. I work downtown, but the main thing for me now, I have to go to the Riverside Hospital a lot. I used to be able to jump on a bus, get there in 45 minutes. Now I've got to go to Tunney's Pasture, and I got to go on the train, and then get off the train and go on another bus. It takes over an hour.
Whereas you could just take one bus in the old days. You could just take one bus and Zippo, there you were, right?
Exactly. And just, they're never on time. And it's just, yeah. And with, I just don't think it works. I think they made a big mistake with it.
Thank you for calling, Anne. I appreciate it.
Okay.
I don't think you've called before. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
So we would. Do you have some more texts there, John, coming in?
I do, slowly but surely. We've got them coming in. Barry says that we and our audio feed sounds better than City News. That's great to hear. Thank you, Barry. Appreciate that. It's got nothing to do with the show, though. Steve says, a friend of mine who works for the federal government had her management ask their staff if they wanted to permanently work from home. All their work is on their computer screen with very little employee interaction. No word on their response, though. Another Ann chimes in. She says, if it means that we don't get Hydro Bob, then yes, Jim Watson deserves another term. Over to Twitch we go. Chrissy says, wonder if the fares will go up, RE OC Transpo, if all these people are not using it and are working from home now. They'll have to recover some of the loss with the ridership somehow, right? Plus, what about the empty buildings with offices now? Parking would be even easier downtown.
That's a very good point. And I just want to point something out, that whether there are sufficient riders or not, the system still has to be paid for. So if there are not enough riders to actually pay for it, guess who pays for it? Those people who don't ride. I mean, here we are out in rural Ottawa, okay, paying the same taxes you people pay downtown. We pay for a bus service. It's not available. There's no bus out here. Where the hell would I get a bus to go anyplace? But I would still, in fact, right now, because the ridership does not pay for the OC Transpo, so I have to pay. I have to subsidize. And if there are more losses, then we all taxpayers have to subsidize the system. There's no magic way to have money. There's no magic way. There's no magic money tree just in the backyard someplace. I wish there was, but there is not. Shields. Okay, very good, John. You're really keeping me on top of things here. Shields. Just want to remind you once again, folks, that here is a dealer. They're in Pakenham, yes. The store the actual store on the main street of Pakenham is not that big, although they have a really great selection, particularly of appliances. But they have a huge warehouse, and their website lists everything that they have. And appliances, and by the way, they also have electronics, very, very good supplier of electronics and furniture. But the main specialty is appliances. Every kind of appliance you could think, and accoutrement. Like I'm thinking of hoods, stove hoods, and so they've got all of that. Yes, they do. It's in stock. 99% sure it's going to be in stock, so there's no delay. The prices are very competitive. And not only that, you can go to the website and, compare the price with what you would have to pay, for example, at a big box store. You might be very, very surprised. The cost of operation at Pakenham is not as high as many of these big box stores. It's not. And they're very good. They're good people. And as I've said before, folks, listen, here's something the big box stores can't match. You buy a major appliance from Shields, 2 big, beautiful T-bone steaks, which in some cases may be worth almost as much as the appliance. That's for sure. You costed the price of beef lately, believe me. More text, yes, coming in, John.
Yeah, and what's with Mexican beef being a thing all of a sudden? I've noticed that.
I guess it's cheaper. I don't know.
No, I don't want it. Anyway, I digress.
Good.
Back to the emails we go. The address here is lowell@blasttheradio.com. Lisa says, Lowell, I found and still find the LRT is great overall and hope to see its expansion. As COVID lifts, I've noticed more people using it. It's great for people who don't drive, have limited mobility, great for tourism. I think it's worth it. That, again, is Lisa. Okay. Rob in Carlton Place says, my daughter-in-law works for the federal government here in Ottawa, and in May she moved to Nova Scotia to work from home. She used to take the bus here in Ottawa. Bank of Canada announced employees can work up to 50% of the time from home once things return to normal. I doubt Ottawa will ever see transit return to its previous ridership.
Yeah, as I say, there was no way, in fairness, there's no way that City Council or any of the planners could have taken that into it. Nobody dreamt that this was going to happen. But it has happened, and I'm just wondering if this is going to have a serious deleterious effect on LRT. I don't think we will ever see those office towers as busy as they used to be anymore. Certainly not in your lifetime, John.
Yeah, no, and I've certainly questioned why we didn't put, pardon the pun, but put the brakes on the LRT during COVID and just, take a break and just sort of see where things end up. Because it's a hell of an investment if we don't have an arena downtown, if we don't have the public service downtown. I mean, we've seen this in all kinds of industries. Look at what we do, Lowell. You're at home, I'm at home, we're doing a radio show heard around the world. Every radio and TV station was broadcasting live from home. They realize they're not going to need these buildings. That building we used to work in the Byward Market, what becomes of that? That's a hell of an asset for a company that owns it. But you don't need to have your employees there to do the job anymore.
The world has certainly changed. I mean, I'm doing this show from here, but I must tell you that there were times when I was on CFRA and I was broadcasting live via satellite from the Bahamas.
Yeah.
And people wouldn't know. In fact, we have radio programs now, syndicated radio programs. You have no idea where this guy is broadcasting. Could very well be a guy broadcasting to a large number of Canadian stations, and he's broadcasting out of Paris, for goodness sake. You would never know. It's a different world.
There's morning shows on in this market that are coming from the United States and the west coast of the United States. You wouldn't know that they're live.
I have another question here. I'd still like to know what you think of Jim Watson, whether he deserves another term.
The only person getting votes, by the way, for mayor is you. Lowell for mayor, says Mike. A vote for Lowell Green is a vote for Sanity, says Cheryl. And there you go. So you're up.
Okay.
You're up next.
Right. Well, I have news for you, folks. I'm not running.
I kind of knew.
I'm not running. Okay. But if you want to send money, go ahead anyway. Feel free.
My P.O. box is listed on the website.
I have another question here for you.
Yes, sir.
See, I'm just filled with questions today.
Go for it.
If the Conservatives win the next election, and they might, should one of the first things they do change the location of the new Civic Hospital back to where it should be, the original location right across the road from the present Civic Hospital? You know what happened. There was a panel of 14 experts, hospital experts, scientists, planners, engineers. They examined, it's 12, I'm sorry, a panel of 12. They examined 14 different possible sites for a new civic hospital. They spent several months doing it. The conclusion, unanimous conclusion, by far, the only site that was even worth talking about was right across the street. An empty weed filled field. You try to say that. Say it, John. Weed-filled field.
Weed fed field.
You can't say it. Weed-filled field. It's difficult. Okay?
Weed-filled field.
Right. Anyway, you understand my point. So the panel, as I say, chose that location for obvious reasons. It would alleviate some of the parking problem. The parking garage could still remain where it is now at the present site. And of course, the big thing is they've spent millions and millions of dollars modernizing, renovating the Heart Institute. So the Heart Institute could stay there and still be hooked into the new Civic just across the road. So John Baird, who was the senior conservative member for the area, said, okay, if you think that's the best site, I'm going to deed you sufficient land for $1 a year. It's the Central Experimental Farm, but that particular spot is not being used. I'm sorry, it's not. It's just a weed-filled field. That's what it is.
Show off.
So the plans went ahead, and in fact, if the plans had gone as supposed to have, construction would already have started on a new civic hospital. We would have saved tens of millions of dollars, lives would be saved, etc. But you know what happened? The Liberals won, and Catherine McKenna, decided, hey, wait a minute, the Conservatives deeded them that land. Well, we're Liberals. We're not going to go along with the Conservatives. So they turned it over to the NCC, who had absolutely no expertise in this. A panel of expert health authorities, hospital officials, and engineers had already chosen the perfect site. So Catherine McKenna said, oh, no, we'll let the NCC, who doesn't have a single health expert on the board. So they chose Tunney's Pasture. Tunney's Pasture. I mean, it's all sorts of bills. Would have taken 100 years to, anyway. So the public finally came and said, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. So then, as you know what happened, the mayor stepped in and they had to compromise. So they're down near Dow's Lake, only to find out now there's all sorts of complaints because in order to build, they got to cut down about 700 trees. There's apparently some land problems there. God knows how much it's going to cost to clean the chemicals out of the land, etc. And the plans still haven't been finalized, and the objections are starting. So my question is, if the Conservatives win the next election, should one of the first things they do is say, scrap the plans down there at Dow's Lake? That doesn't make any sense at all. Let's go back to the original site. And by the way, I'm going to go to a text in just a moment. I have to tell you something. I've done a fair amount of research on this, and I also have, as you know, an education in agriculture, and was raised on the farm. And I want to tell you that I don't think very much worthwhile agriculture research is being done, for Canada at least, at the Central Experimental Farm anymore. Now, there was a time when it was quite valuable. Helped to develop wheat, for example, that was rust resistant and frost resistant, that helped us expand the West, okay? And a number of other things, no question about it. There was a time. But those times are changed. I don't know what they're doing. I don't think there's hardly any real worthwhile experimentation going on. I'll tell you why. All of the crop research now is being done by the various companies, the seed companies, the fertilizer companies, the insecticide, herbicide company. They're the ones who are doing the research. They have come up with new sprays, for example, which greatly reduce the amount of spray you have to use in order to fight rust, etc. It's the private companies that are doing the research and continue to do that. Same thing with seed. If you're ever driving along the farm, along farmland, and they're growing corn, you will probably see 2 or 3 different signs at the end of corn rows, different companies. That's DeKalb, for example. They're experimenting on the various kinds of seed corn, etc. They're the ones who are doing the experimental work. As far as livestock goes, it was my father who first smuggled the landrace hog into this country and finally had to open up the country to landrace hog. It's landrace hogs that revolutionized the pork industry in this country. The landrace is so much longer and leaner, it has an extra set of ribs. It was my father who, as I say, at first had to smuggle them in because it was illegal to have landrace hogs in this country to protect the local industry. So that revolutionized the pork industry. It was the importation of Charolais and Simmental cattle that essentially have revolutionized the beef industry. Central Experimental Farm had nothing to do with that. I could go on and on. I just don't think, I have to be very honest. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I don't think there's very much, if any, real experimental work underway that's of benefit to the Canadian agricultural industry at the Central Experimental Farm. Times have changed, folks. And it's fine. It's a big, I'm not saying we should scrap it. Absolutely. It's a big, beautiful green spot. But as far as this business, we can't put a hospital there because we're experimenting. I don't believe it for a moment. I do not believe it. I'd like to know, if I were younger, had a little bit more energy, I'd spend some time. I'd do some real research. Exactly what research is underway on that spot that they said, we can't locate the hospital there. What research are you talking about? Because the last time I drove by there, it looked to me like they were doing research on dandelions.
I have seen some sunflowers.
Sunflowers?
Yep.
Well, there's a paved parking lot on that, at the site or very close to the site across from the Civic.
Yes.
And it's a dandelion-filled field. You have some more text, John.
Yes, we do. We got a lot of questions on the go here too. So we got a lot of balls in the air. But here we go.
Yeah.
Is the LRT worth the money? Does Jim Watson deserve another term? And if the Conservatives win the next election, should they change the location of the new Civic Hospital back to across from where it currently is? All right. So David says Civic Hospital, absolutely change it back. Sonia says most definitely, as far as putting the hospital back to where it should be across.
It should
the street.
be.
Yeah. Michael says, I don't understand how Jim could get elected after this LRT fiasco. Peter says, supply chain is low, so they import the Mexican beef. Don't touch that stuff. Thank you, Peter. I wasn't sure why I was seeing that in all the flyers. Driving me crazy. Kevin.
Before you go further,
Yep.
I have to tell you a little story.
Okay.
This is not Mexican beef, but this is one of the biggest mistakes of my life. Was a number of years ago, I very foolishly agreed to meet my daughter and granddaughter in Cuba. Never been to Cuba. I'll never go back. Anyway, the food was pretty bad.
Yep.
So I decided we would try and find a decent restaurant someplace in Havana or what. So they recommended this restaurant. So I went into the restaurant, and the waiter is there, and it's a lovely looking restaurant inside. This is a true story. So I ordered a steak, and the waiter says, Monsieur, says, Senor, I don't recommend the steak. I said, why not? He said, Cuban cows,
Yep.
they have lifestyle issues.
Wow.
Honest to God, they have lifestyle issues. So at any rate, I ordered something else and got the sickest I've ever been in my life. I almost died. Anyway, that's that story. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on Cuba. Chicken and pork stick to those. Okay, here we go. Kevin says, looking forward to 2025, Trudeau and Teflon Jim will finally be history. Peter says, Dow's Lake property is likely owned by some big liberal fat cats. David says,
No, it's a Central Experimental Farm.
Yeah. David says 100-plus year commitment. Next election, the original site was fine. And another David says, I think the experimental farm is a tourist attraction. I can't imagine why. Okay.
Well, it's a tourist attraction. The barns are there. They're raising
True.
cattle. I'm not sure
True.
why.
The gardens are absolutely gorgeous to walk
The
through.
gardens
For
are
sure.
gorgeous.
Yes.
There's no question.
I'll take that back.
Now, there may be some experimental work underway with horticulture, with flowers and so forth. But I'm talking about agriculture. I don't think there's any worthwhile research being done today at the Central Experimental Farm. And we're spending millions and millions on it. As a green space, it's great, beautiful, right in the center of the city. But as far as helping agriculture, I don't think so. All right. Centennial Glass. You've heard me talking about them now for a long, long time. I mean what I say. I want to point out, I do not endorse anyone unless I know the people, I like the people, and they have a long, long track record. And not only that, if, for example, I'm endorsing a company and I get complaints, if it's one or two complaints, but I will immediately go to the company and if it's not resolved what I think to my satisfaction or the customer's satisfaction, I will stop endorsing. I've done that on more than one occasion. Just stopped endorsing. They just wasn't satisfied. However, with Centennial Glass, more than 20 years I've been endorsing them. I cannot recall a single complaint. And I'll tell you this, if I did get a complaint and relayed it to Centennial, they would fix it immediately, you can be sure. They're good people. They know their stuff. It's a large company, there's no question about it, but it's local and it's family owned. Centennial Glass, Industrial Avenue here in Ottawa, and in good old Renfrew. More text. Yes, John.
Yeah, we got 2 Facebook comments and 2 emails to tackle before we let you go here.
Fire away.
So, the email, John Lowell, I drove the original O-Train for 8 years before I retired, and I also worked as a Red Vest O-Train ambassador up until the pandemic hit. I believe more people will return to taking the train system once it can prove its reliability. I got off to a rocky start, and hopefully once the expansion is completed, it will be a great service. The hospital should be built across the street from the original at Parkdale Avenue. Move it back there. Terry in Laurentian View. Lowell, I think the best location should have been Tunney's Pasture. There's a bridge to Gatineau, the McDonald Parkway, LRT, loads of space for parking already available. All that needs is 2 buildings to be torn down to make way for it. At the end of the street, take a look at the satellite images, says Lisa. And Valda says LRT is going to the airport, but I want to know who the heck will use it dragging luggage with them. It won't be me.
That it? Thank you very much. Thank you all, folks. Some good response today. I appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow.
The Lowell Green Show is seen and heard live around the world at 2 p.m. Eastern. Connect with us online at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Download the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green podcast. This is a production of blasttheradio.com.